We're in New York. And so I'm going to read the 5 pages of me coming to New York. It just seems like the right thing to do here tonight. Slightly edited version. Context. I was going to D.C. There was no New York in the plan. The day before I'm flying out, I literally have the coins left in my pocket because there was no reason to hold any money because I was flying out the next day. And I'd come a long way across the country, and I looked at a map and I thought, oh my God, I'm really close to New York. How could you do this trip and not go to New York? And so I negotiated with the airline in person and was able to get a discount. I sold my ticket back from DC and got a ticket from JFK back 6 days later. And I made $50 on doing that ticket swap. So I had $50 and a few shrapnel in my pocket, and I had a flight out in 6 days' time. So this is me arriving. I had a hitchhike from DC to New York. This is me arriving in New York and what happened to me when I arrived here. By late afternoon, I picked up a ride that was going into Manhattan, downtown. As we drove, I remember the constant stream of traffic and passing all the container cranes, as well as an overwhelming number of large trucks. It was kind of smelly, like bad chemical plant emissions. New Jersey. A $7 a night youth hostel. I was dropped off within walking distance of my $7 youth hostel on the Lower West Side of Manhattan. It was a long walk with a heavy backpack at the end of a hot day. I arrived at the youth hostel looking forward to a good lie down on a bed. I would put my feet up for a while and then maybe go out for a quick walk at night to see the lights of Manhattan. Sorry, son, we are full. This was not the greeting I was looking for. This was not in the plan. I knew the next cheapest youth hostel in Manhattan was $14 a night, twice the price. And it's not complicated math. Twice the price meant that I could only afford to stay in the hostel half of the nights I was in Manhattan. I had slept out in various parts of the US with different risks and results on this trip. I knew New York City was not somewhere I should contemplate sleeping out. No park bench for me. This was New York in 1980. A problem. I was tired. It was early evening. My head was spinning. I checked my travel book and decided to spend some of my contingency insurance fund, $2, 2 quarters on a subway train would get me to the youth hostel number 2. I would pay the $14, spend the night there, come back to the $7 youth hostel the next morning early and try to book in. I would just have to work out what to do about the lost night and lack of money tomorrow after a rest. I worked out how to get to and use the subway and make sure I was going in the right direction. Getting the backpack through the toll booth was not a trivial maneuver. It was about 5 stops to the next youth hostel. The subway car was almost empty. I stood up my backpack against the next seat and propped my head on my hands, my elbows on my knees, slumped and tired. Wearing rollerblades on a New York subway. Do you have the time? A voice chirped from the other end of the subway car. I looked at my watch before looking at the chirper. I advised them of the time and then looked along the subway car. Quite a sight. 2 guys, one wearing rollerblades underneath very high-heeled and soled shoes. Think Elton John at his peak. Spiky hair, somewhere between blonde and pink, tight pink shorts, and a second guy wearing blue jeans. I love the accent, said the second guy. They asked me where I was from, what I was doing, where I was going. We slid into the easy chatter of three men passing in the night, with no ill will towards one another, and a mild mutual interest in what had brought us to this place and point in time. I was a little more defensive in conversation than my normal self, partly because of exhaustion, and partly because I felt that I was in a slightly uncomfortable position. I had never been on the New York subway before. Its reputation for crime and hostility and dirt was well known. I had been keeping a close eye on the map by the door of the subway car. I was trying to learn the routes rapidly so as not to get lost and really screw up the day. My subway stop arrived. I got up and slung my backpack over my shoulder as we were approaching the stop. "Oh, you're getting off at the same stop as we are," said my rollerbladed friend in a sing-song voice. We stepped onto the platform and then slid into a more serious conversation. I had not fully explained all my challenging travel and accommodation circumstances and my prospects for the next few days in New York, but they had worked out enough from our subway car dialogue to know I was not going out fine dining, nor was I an invitee to a glitzy party that night. I'm guessing I looked tired, hungry, and like I was running out of options on my first night in Manhattan. "Why don't you come with us? We're going to a friend's apartment. Have a few drinks. We will introduce you to our New York society." I was getting hit on. In almost every other situation, this would be an easy, "No, thank you." But I was looking for options. One night spent sleeping on a couch could make or break the whole week ahead. I looked at my newfound friendly tour guides. I needed a bed for the night. I thought I would take a risk. If it got too close for comfort, I would punch them and run. It's literally what I thought. If it gets out of hand, I will thump these guys and run away. I was bigger than them, even though there were two of them. Not that either of them was in any way aggressive toward me, but I had basically agreed to go back to their apartment. How would that sound in the police report the next day? I was acutely aware also that I was on the third masterclass of my hitchhiking degree. I had jumped into a truck in Death Valley when the fork in the road went one way to Las Vegas and the other way to being chopped into little pieces and put in a hovel in the desert. On the way to the Grand Canyon, I had accepted a pickup from a middle-aged man who wanted to swap laundry detergent for sexual favors. I was older now, matured. I recognized potential risks a little earlier and maybe approached them with the first signs of hitchhiker's cynicism. We entered the apartment. I remember it being warm and cozy, a little hazy with smoke, on the second or third floor of a walk-up. There were probably 10 to 12 other people there, all men, I assumed all gay. I put my backpack down carefully in a spot where I could see it. I was handed a bottle of beer. As my new friends all greeted each other, I stood back and assessed the room. The others were polite toward me, but not especially welcoming or engaging. They offered perfunctory greetings. I was offered and accepted a small wooden dining chair. Sitting down felt good. I maneuvered my chair towards the table and started to consume snacks in embarrassing amounts. I was warm, dry, had a beer in my hand, and the peanuts were great. I remembered that I could always thump them and run if something turned ugly. Here's the key. After a while, certainly more than an hour, my spiky-haired host and his bejeaned friend asked to talk to me, to have a private conversation. He advised me they were going back to Spiky's apartment, both of them, for the night. As a result, they would not be using the bejeaned boyfriend's apartment. I could use it, if that was okay with me. I was looking for a catch, a setup, but could not think of one. Tentatively, I agreed. We left about 20 minutes later. It was a good walk for the three of us. It was dark now, late evening. There were people on the streets, but it was not busy. I remember being surprised at seeing stores still open. Fruit stores, small grocery stores, not just restaurants and bars. I was not used to that. The apartment was in Little Italy, in a building called a brownstone, which meant nothing to me at the time. When we arrived at the building, I was introduced to a very large old lady wearing what seemed to be like 3 oversized aprons wrapped around her and baggy stockings around her bloated legs. She was sitting in a large, well-worn chair at the top of some steps, almost like a lookout. She buzzed us into the building. We walked up a couple of flights of stairs, and then Jeans pulled out a key and unlocked the door. Inside, on the top floor of the brownstone, was what they called a loft apartment. Small, but neat. On the left wall was a platform bed about 5 feet off the ground. At the end of the apartment was a sliding window that also gave access to what looked like a metal winding staircase right outside. A fire escape. Here's the key, they offered. It's not much of an apartment, but it's yours. How long are you staying in Manhattan, they asked. I leave on Thursday from JFK. It was Saturday night. Okay, help yourself to anything you find in the refrigerator. When you leave, put the key in this envelope and hand it to the lady you met sitting downstairs. All good? Well, yes, well, that's very kind of you. Very English-sounding, somewhat unexcited response, as I could not really grasp what was happening. Enjoying Manhattan, they exclaimed in unison. And off they went. From a fire escape in Manhattan, I had an apartment in Little Italy for 5 nights, free of charge, given to me by 2 people I had met only a few hours before on a New York subway ride. As I closed up the door, and after I had inspected the contents of the refrigerator, only a few lava beans, it suddenly dawned on me that I did not know the men's names. I think they had probably introduced themselves to me at some point, but with so much going on, I had missed it. I had no idea who Spiky and Jeans actually were. I had no contact details. They had not left me the address where they were staying, just told me to drop off the key with the apron-clad lady downstairs. They had gone, and I did not know who they were. I never would. I washed my hands and splashed water over my head. So I always have difficulty reading this. I washed my hands and splashed water over my head. I changed out of my dusty and sweaty hiking clothes. I opened the window to inspect the strange black metal staircase outside. I stepped out. It was a beautiful, clear, starlit night, now cooling from the heat of the day. Off to my left, I could see the World Trade Center, bright and majestic in the distance, reaching way above all the other buildings, pointing towards the sky. Off to the right, I could pick out the Empire State Building. I knew it from photos, movies, and books. I took deep breaths. What a day. What a night. What an adventure. I had been cynical, preparing to defend myself against the couple who had helped me. Standing out on the fire escape, I could finally acknowledge the extent of their generosity, their benevolence, indiscriminate and unconditional. Welcome to New York, Greg. Welcome to New York, I kept saying to myself. I was quite possibly the luckiest man alive. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you.